The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 23rd webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This and all subsequent webinars are available on makara.us under the subheading Moria Federation Webinars. You see it there, that little white circle. Click on that and you'll get this page up. Okay, at the end of the last webinar, we were just finishing HPB's commentary on verse 4, but first, as is our habit, we'll start by checking in on HPB and Colonel Olcott. Last month we found them on the shores of the Ganges in Benares, and we catch up with them this month back home in Bombay. I was lucky enough to find an actual photo of where they lived while they were in Bombay. So this was, HPB walked up those steps. Looks like they haven't been walked up in quite a while. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Michael, Stacy, can you read that for us, please?
Absolutely. We took the train for Bombay on 28th December and, without adventure, reached the home on the 30th. The last days of 1880 were thus passed in our new bungalow, the Crow's Nest, on the rocky slope of the hill of Breach Candy. It had been selected and taken for us in our absence, and we were charmed with its spacious, high-studded rooms, its large verandas, and its extensive views of sea and land. Since the beginning of the year 1879, we had been living in the thickly settled Indian quarter of Gurgaon Back Road, in a grove of palms where the sea breezes scarcely penetrated, and the shift to the new locality was delightful. A special advantage was that the number of our casual visitors became so much lessened by reason of our distance from the center of population that we found time for reading. We occupied our new premises until December 1882, when our headquarters were permanently established at Adyar. The proper rental of the bungalow was Rs 200 per mensum, but we got it for Rs 65 because of its, because of its evil reputation for being haunted. The alleged ghosts did not trouble us, however, save in a solitary instance, and that was quickly disposed of. One night I had gone to bed and was dropping asleep when I felt one corner of my charpie being lifted, as if by someone standing in the thickness of the wall, which it was touching. Instantly recovering my full consciousness, I pronounced a certain Arabic word of power that HPB had taught me in New York, and the cot was replaced on its legs, and the meddlesome spook decamped and never troubled me more.
Thanks, Michael. Well, just another day in the life of HPB, being Colonel Olcott. So, we're going to be finishing up the final commentary on verse 4, which references the last sentence in the verse. But first, I'll read this. Then the three fall into four. The radiant essence becomes 7 inside, 7 outside. The luminous egg, which in itself is 3, curdles and spreads in milk-white curds throughout the depths of mother, the root that grows in the depths of the ocean of life. It's one of the key verses in this stanza, which is full of some amazing verses. So let's look at the commentary. References the last sentence in the verse, the luminous egg, Hiranyagarbha, which is in itself is 3, the triple hypostases of Brahma or Vishnu, the 3 Avashtas, curdles and spreads in milk-white curds throughout the depths of mother, the root that grows in the ocean of life. So could we get a reader for the commentary? Start at the B section there.
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Certainly. As, however, neither the Rig Veda nor Manu, both preceding the Vasvada's deluge, that of the bulk of the fourth race, mention this deluge, it is evident that it is not the great deluge, nor that which carried away Atlantis, nor even the deluge of Noah, which is meant here. This churning relates to a period before the Earth's formation and is in direct connection with that other universal legend, the various and contradictory versions of which culminated in the Christian dogma of the war in heaven and the fall of the angels, see Book 2, also Revelations. The Brahmanas, reproached by the Orientalists with their versions on the same subjects, often clashing with each other, are preeminently occult works, hence used purposely as blinds. They were allowed to survive for public use and property only because they were and are absolutely unintelligible to the masses. Otherwise, they would have disappeared from circulation as long ago as the days of Akbar.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this commentary? So, first, a deluge, and with it the end of a cycle, small or great, followed by the churning of the sea of milk, which reintroduces differentiation at a higher point of evolution. This redemptive event, which takes place at the beginning of each and every cycle, is directly related to the bringing of the fire of mind to humankind. Called by Christians the war in heaven, the churning described in verse 4, which we're told occurred before the formation of the world, reintroduced the mysterious 14 precious things to a new globe of the earth chain, including what's described here as the supreme treasure, the Amrita, right, which is the elixir of life. A metaphor, of course, for the spiritual substance. So, okay, having gained some insight
Francis,
into, yeah.
Michael's got his hand up.
Yes, Michael.
Mike, go ahead, you're self-muted.
I was just thinking about how absolutely marvelous HPB's wit is to talk about how certain great truths can remain because the masses of humanity are not able to comprehend them, so they're not dangerous because of that.
Yeah, you could write a small book on the wit and the wit, as well as the sarcasm of HPB, and often they go together, as they do here, right?
Yes.
And often these occult works, the ones that survive, had to be scrambled to some extent, what she calls purposeful blinds. And then those who have some keys, and just by reading DK or Blavatsky, you begin to gain some of these keys, though not the truly esoteric ones, that are given at initiations. These works becomes, at least in some part, more understandable, like the Brahmanas, right? Thanks, Michael. Any other thoughts? Okay, here we are. So, so let's take a final look. I'll reread it. Then the 3, triangle, fallen tooth 4, quaternary. The radiant essence becomes 7 inside, 7 outside. The luminous egg, Hiranyagarbha, which in itself is three, the triple hypostasis of Brahma or Vishnu, the three avastas, curdles and spreads in milk-white curds throughout the depths of mother, the root that grows in the ocean of life. Though HPB describes the difference between numbers as we normally use them and the number as a great potency that forms and informs all manifestation, she doesn't comment on the numbers used in the first two sentences of this verse. Then the three fall into four. The radiant essence becomes 7 inside and 7 outside. However, toward the end of the first volume of the Secret Doctrine, HPB does explore this fall of 3 into 4. Could we get a reader for this short commentary?
Leslie, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Thank you. The monad, only the emanation and reflection of the point, logos, in the phenomenal world, becomes, as the apex of the manifested equilateral triangle, the father. The left side or line is the duad, the mother. The right side represents the son, his mother's husband, in every cosmogony, as one of the apex, one with the apex. At the basic line is the universal plane of productive nature, unifying on the phenomenal plane, father, mother, son, as these were unified in the apex, in the supersensuous world. By mystic transmutation, they become the quaternary, the triangle became the tetratus.
Thank you, Tetractus. Yes, 1 and 2 were considered by the Pythagoreans to be not numbers at all, but rather fundamental principles, making 3 the first true number, the Trinity or 3 in 1, Father, Mother, Son, a reflection of the unmanifested 1. 4, the immediate successor of the triad, was a symbol of immortality, the immaculate feminine, a perfect number, and thus the ideal root of all subsequent hierarchical numbers on the lower planes, including the physical. Thus, 4 as an externalization of the triangle's baseline, imagine a square just below that baseline, becomes the mother of all productivity. All comes forth from that square. 3 falling into 4 represents the divine union, from which follows the tetractus, the geometrical prototype for all manifestation. The tetractus is itself is a deep study and an amazing teaching and geometrical figure. The 10, the 7, the 3 unmanifest. So the 3 within the 4, depicted on Masonic aprons, becomes the fructified egg, producing 7 inside. That's the 7 spirits before the throne of God, the Prajapatis, Elohim, and the Ray Lords, from which emerged 7 outside, the septenary manifestation of the Manvantara, from planes to planets. This dual 7 have a direct correspondence in the 7 root and 7 seed manus that initiate and close each round. You'll find this 14 often in esoteric literature and in ancient Egyptian thought. The 14 configured greatly, 7 causal levels and 7 manifest levels. So any thoughts or questions? Final sentence of the verse is, the luminous egg, which in itself is 3, curdles and spreads in milk-white curds throughout the depths of mother. It's deeply, deeply symbolic. The curdling represents the effect of 3 falling into 4, the first differentiation, and the means by which the radiant essence, the life aspect, is hidden within the, quote, depths of mother, the primeval deep. All this is subjective preparation for the sevenfold root that, quote, grows in the depths of the ocean of life, which we'll learn about in the next verse. So this curdling and spreading in milk-white curds is indicated in this illustration here, right? These are the gods and the asuras that are using this great seven-headed snake, which are the seven principles, turning Mount Meru, the center of the world, in order to churn the sea of milk and create these curds. Here's another illustration. We looked at this briefly last time too. A marvelous illustration. That's my favorite. You can see the gods there on the left. Vishnu is sitting atop Mount Meru, and then the asuras, their polar opposite on the right. You have the cow of plenty there floating on the bottom right corner, and other elements like the white elephant, some angelic beings, holy beings being pulled up onto the left side. Rich mythology. Okay, so let's get on here. So all this is the subjective preparation for the sevenfold root that, quote, grows in the depths of the ocean of life. So if are there any final thoughts or questions about verse 4 before we move on to the deceptively simple verse 5? Anyone? Okay. The root remains, the light remains, the curds remain, and still Oiaohu is one. So let's take a look at the A section commentary. Can we get a reader for this short paragraph?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Great. Oiaohu is rendered father, mother of the gods in the commentaries, or the six in one, or the septenary root from which all proceeds. All depends upon the accent given to these seven vowels, which may be pronounced as 1, 3, or even 7 syllables by adding an E after the O. This mystic name is given out because without a thorough mastery of the triple pronunciation, it remains forever ineffectual.
Okay, so that gets back to what Michael, Stacy, and I were talking about, this idea that powerful, potent mantrams and words can be given out if the means of pronunciation are withheld. And so we've been gifted by this very potent seven-voweled word. So before we consider the pronunciation, let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary definition of Oiaohu. Can we get a reader, please?
Okay. Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
I'll try. Oiaohu, also Oiaihu, Oiaihu, a very ancient form of the sacred and mystical holy name as it occurs in the stanzas of Dzyan. These 7 letters stand for 7 vowels, and according to the method of pronunciation, the name may be given as 1, 3, or even 7 syllables by adding an E after the letter O. The pronunciation is somewhat similar to the Chinese tones, kungs. The spelling of a word is the same, but according to the tonal value or stress given, its meaning alters. This word is a way of expressing the cosmic life in all its 7, 10, or 12-fold divisions, each letter of the 7 referring to one of the cosmic principles or elements. Their union into a single term calls attention to cosmic unity. It is a representation for the 6 manifested and the 1 unmanifested, thus making the mystic 7 principal elements of our home universe. The Oeaohu, the younger, is the reflection or mirroring on a lower plane of the universal unity, and therefore unmanifest. The second or partially manifest and the creative manifest or third logoi. Corresponding to Quan Shai Yin, Oeaohu contains in himself the 7 creative hosts, the Sephiroth, and is thus the essence of manifested wisdom. In the human constitution, Oeaohu, the younger, is the higher triad of Atma Buddhi Manas, with an emphatic pointing to the Atman as the predominant life in this higher triad. Similarly so as regards the cosmos or universe. The meaning of one of its permutations, Oeahu, is, among the Eastern occultists of the North, a circular wind, whirlwind. But in this instance, it is a term to denote the ceaseless and eternal cosmic motion, or rather the force that moves it, which force is tacitly accepted as the deity but never named. It is the eternal Karana, the ever-acting cause. The Gnostics used the 7 vowels of the Greek alphabet, R-A, R-A-H-E-O-Y-O, on their gems. And in the Pistis Sophia, the Rabbi Jesus, in speaking to his disciples, says, Nothing therefore is more excellent than the mysteries which ye seek after, saving only the mystery of the 7 vowels and their 49 powers, and their numbers thereof. And no name is more excellent than all these vowels. Blavatsky gives several variants of the spelling of this word, and the modern spelling is of minor importance. What is important is to get the mystic or metaphysical philosophical meaning behind the word.
Thank you, Carrie. You did heroic work there. Appreciate it. So, thoughts or questions about this Theosophical Glossary definition of Oeaohu? It's a root. It is the root. Oeaohu is the root from verse 4 that, quote, grows in the depths of the ocean of life. The septenary root, represented by the 7 vowels from which all proceeds. Not surprisingly, a treatise on cosmic fire opens with a reference to this most inclusive of all beings. Note how distinctly DK separates the absolute from the manifested universe. Could we get a reader for this? This very first writing in the treatise on cosmic fire.
Okay, Karen's got her hand up, so let's let her ask her question or say what she's going to say, and then if you can read for us, Karen.
Oh, okay. Well, my question is related to what was just read about the 7 vowels and their 49 powers. Is that related to the manifestation on the planes?
It certainly is. The planes themselves could be said to be held in place by the logos, which means word. And so, for instance, one could understand it as the solar logos, whose 7-fold word holds the 7 planes manifesting in this iteration of our solar system. He holds them in place simultaneously through the continuous sounding of these 7 vowels, right? And you could look at all 7-fold manifestations, including the rays, as also being animated by these fundamental vowels. And what HPB is telling us here is that this is the word whose proper pronunciation is or are those 7 vowels.
And they're related to the planes of manifestation.
Through the 7-fold nature of that manifestation, right? So each of the vowels could be literally holding in place or continuing the form of each of these planes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't heard it stated that way before. Okay, you want me to read?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, the teaching, which is given in this treatise on cosmic fire, might be formulated in the following terms. These postulates are simple extensions of the 3 fundamentals to be found in the proem in the first volume of The Secret Doctrine by H.P. Blavatsky. Students are recommended to study them carefully. In this way, their understanding of the treatise will be greatly aided. 1. There is one boundless, immutable principle, one absolute reality, which antecedes all manifested, conditioned being. It is beyond the range and reach of any human thought or expression. The manifested universe is contained within this absolute reality and is a conditioned symbol of it. In the totality of this manifested universe, 3 aspects are to be conceived. 1, the first cosmic logos, impersonal and unmanifested, the precursor of the manifested. 2, the second cosmic logos, spirit matter, life, the spirit of the universe. 3, the third cosmic logos, cosmic ideation, the universal world soul. From these basic creative principles in successive gradations, there issue in ordered sequence the numberless universes comprising countless manifesting stars and solar systems.
Thank you, Karen. So to interleave the Secret Doctrine and this teaching, which many of us are much more used to, the language of DK, the absolute stands completely outside of any kind of naming, right? Even the name, the absolute, is meaningless. It is, as he says, antecedes all manifested conditioned being, right? And is beyond the range and reach of any human thought or expression. So it doesn't describe it because it is completely and truly indescribable. We spent hours of on this concept when we were reading the proem. The first cosmic logos would be equivalent to this Oiaohu, the elder. I say elder because when we get to verse 7, you'll see that there is an Oiaohu, the younger, right? The second cosmic logos is Mula Prakriti, or spirit matter, which is the feminine aspect, right? Still, it's described in some places as quasi-manifested, and then through it's the virgin lotus, from which springs the third cosmic logos, Oiaohu, the younger, which is also related to cosmic ideation and is the universal world soul. So that's, just to interrelate some of these terms. I want to go over just a couple of things from this definition. The pronunciation is somewhat similar to the Chinese tones kungs. The spelling of a word is the same, but according to the tonal value or stress given, its meaning alters. And then this word oya ohu is a way of expressing the cosmic life in all its 7, 10, or 12-fold divisions, each letter of the 7 referring to one of the cosmic principles or elements. Their union into a single term calls attention to cosmic unity. I've reread this statement in order to stress the fact that in both Sinzar and Sanskrit, though to a lesser extent, the many and particular potencies of a single word, in this case oya ohu, or phrase, are only accessible if there is one, precise pronunciation imbued with a consecrated intent, 2, specific stress of its syllables, and 3, a progressive intonation as one sounds a sacred word or phrase. The combination of these factors enables a sacred word or phrase to contain many meanings, both horizontally and vertically. So when a master pronounces a word or phrase such as oya ohu in a way that is aligned with his or her intent, it acts as an invocation and thus empowers the consecrated impersonal intention of that master. Any thoughts or questions about this whole concept? It's, for me, a very fascinating concept that the nature of the pronunciation, very specific pronunciation, determines the level of meaning of a word. Okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
Scott's got his hand up.
Go.
Please go ahead, Scott. You're self-muted. We can't hear you. You're still self-muted.
There we go.
There you go.
All righty.
Yep.
I like the way you broke that down into 3 steps of speaking. I don't know where you got that, but it's great. This 6 hiding 1, going back to that, and maybe you'll get back around to it again, is always reminds me of the Pleiades, the 6 and the missing 7th.
Right.
And always that, and also with the in the Tetractus there, those outer 6 points and the 7th one in the middle. That's the unmanifest, which gives you a cube when you put it in.
Right.
Anyway, it always brings to mind the Pleiades and how important they are as the mothers, the handmaids, the mothers of Aries, of the Mars, something like that. Which would, if it's something like that, as far as manifestation goes, that would be a Martian, an Aryan.
Yeah, maybe Michael Robbins could answer that. I don't know about its astrological connection to Mars.
We came across it once in the EA, or twice. So I'll look it up and see. So
Yeah,
not so vague. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. There's, each of these 3, precise pronunciation view with a consecrated intent. Well, you could start with consecrated intent for all of it, which is completely impersonal. Otherwise, it becomes black magic, of course. And then all your steps are imbued with that consecrated intent, right? But I sometimes listen to, for instance, there are tapes on YouTube available of the Hindu chanting of the Gayatri. And it's not just read like we would read it or stated like we would read it. It has a very specific meter and tonality. It's quite powerful stuff. Very much white magic study. I see a hand.
Yes, but also Michael. Michael, were you going to say something?
I don't think I can answer that, but I do recall the reference that that Scott is mentioning,
Mm-hmm.
connected with Mars, and there's another very strong connection with Venus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, and it goes like this. It goes Pleiades, Cancer, and Venus. That's the line of descent. Mars will always represent somehow the personality and the third aspect of divinity, which the Pleiades are associated with. It's probably, you know, the monadic ray of that great system. But the interesting thing is that it's not only Sirius that is feeding and training the solar angels, but the Pleiades themselves are involved with Venus and the solar angels. And with this, let's call it cosmic buddhi, cosmic love wisdom. So the second ray is in there too, and that's the reason for the descent. It's not just a material origin. It's not simply the third aspect. The second is there, and some people think that since it's the hub of the wheel, it's even the first aspect involved as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. I wonder if the sixth and the Cancer's threefold Neptunian ruler relate in some way. You know, the sixth ray of Neptune. I don't know.
Yeah. I think if you go, you know, to the end of esoteric astrology, it captures all those cosmic fire references, you know, and I think the thing about Mars is in there somewhere. So we can, you know, if, you know, look it up sometime.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
There's a great Native American Indian tale, which is that, you know, the Pleiades were used to test the eyesight, quote, unquote, of the warriors, right? And of course, warriors were also, you know, did time in the Kiva. They all studied. And so when they were able to hone their eyesight in such a way that they could see the seventh star, and they were then accepted to go on the hunt. And, you know, you can read that easily as literal, and it's just interesting. But, you know, when you see that it's, in fact, what's being referenced here is that it suggests a certain stage of inner sight that is being asked of or even required of these, you know, acolytes. And of course,
it is really interesting. And by the way, I found it. Maybe someone else found it too. The Pleiades are the supposed wives of the seven rishis of the Great Bear. They are also the nurses of the god of war, Mars, the commander of the celestial armies, from Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, page 579. So that's in Cosmic Fire, that's on page 657. Right? No, excuse me. In astrology, the Cosmic Fire reference and Secret Doctrine references this one, page 657.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, that's useful.
Yep.
So, any other?
Yes. Carrie's had his hand up for a little bit, but Scott has his hand up now too. So, Scott, did you want to respond to what Michael and Francis were just saying? We can't hear you, Scott.
Is he self-muted again?
No. His mic.
There we go. Michael found the same quote that I was going to read, so it covered that. But there's also here one talking about from TCF. The sun Sirius is the source of the logoic mind, manas, in the same sense that the Pleiades are connected with the evolution of mind in the seven heavenly men, and Venus was responsible for the coming of mind to the earth. That connects up Venus with the Pleiades too. But this connection to Mars is the one that I've come across in different places. It's the nurses of the god of war. It's always intrigued me. Anyway, that's all.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear more about that connection. You know, why nurse of the god of war? That's, you know, it brings in that idea of that basic element of the milk again. I don't know. It's fascinating.
And
I agree
also,
with Michael. It's definitely third principle stuff. You know,
right.
The wives of the Great Bear, the rishis of the Great Bear, and you know.
Yeah. If I may say, just Francis and Scott, yeah, it is so. But in both of those cases, the Sirius case and the Pleiades case, they both have an emphasis on the second and the third aspect. I mean, you know, with Sirius, like the cosmic Christ, and then
Right.
you go there if you're deficient in Manus. So it's got both going, a fifth ray soul and a lot of second ray. And the same thing for the Pleiades. I'll find the reference that hooks it up with the solar angels, you know.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
Carrie has his hand up, and then we have a comment from Leslie. Go ahead, please, Carrie.
Just coming back to the passage which we were reading, the one which I read, in fact, it talks about, no, sorry, the one you were on. I beg your pardon. Yes, this one. It talks about the 7 syllables, and the pronunciation seems to be very important, but we are pronouncing it O-A-R-O-Hu, whereas perhaps it's O-A-R-O-H-O-O. The H.
Well, possibly. Now, remember, he said, actually, I've illustrated this. She says it could be pronounced. I always have a problem calling her a she, but what are you going to do? She incarnated as a woman. DK refers to her as in the masculine sense. So yeah. Anyway, in this little paragraph, she says that Oya Ohu can be pronounced as 1, 3, or even 7 syllables, with the 7 achieved by adding an E after the letter O, which
What
might
does
give
that mean?
it might give us this. As in O-E-A-O-E-Hu-E, right? But even if this represents the correct insertion of E's, which is unlikely actually, we have no idea how to pronounce these letters or what stress each vowel should have or song. This is, of course, as it should be in order to protect the uninitiated. So yeah, this is literally just as, I'm just taking literally what she said. If you add an E after the letter O, right? But you could take, for instance, at the end there where you have 2 O's, it might be, instead of Hu-E, it might be Ho-E-O, right? God knows. But, it's still, and, we don't actually want to unveil, we couldn't if we did want to, but the true pronunciation of this, it's, especially a word like this, we're talking about the very highest creative aspect, and this is English. These are Western letters, right? Used in Western languages, translated from the Sanskrit. So there's definitely going to be a break there between whatever symbol DK was looking at, probably after he recovered from looking at that symbol, he came up with this Oya-O-Hu.
And also the O in the 4th place might be different from the O in the 1st place.
Certainly might. Yeah.
It has a different meaning, presumably.
I would certainly imagine that if the O's are repeated to be, part of the 7, that they would definitely have different meanings. We have actually just, if you want to give, say we give the HO a separate one, well, then we have 4 indicated here, which means that, 4 vowels indicated here, which means that the other 3 O's would have to have, as you suggest, other meanings. It could just be the fact that they follow the first O, and then the fact that the third one follows the second O could completely change the meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. It doesn't really get us any closer to any kind of true pronunciation, but that's not our goal in this. I'd hate to have, everybody in the webinar suddenly fried to a crisp because we accidentally hit the right sound,
Francis, I found the page. It's page 1157, and there's two references there with the 7 streams of energy from the Pleiades, which are the psychical force demonstrating through the solar angel. The Pleiades via the solar angel or ego, page 1157, Cosmic Fire.
That's interesting.
So
read that part
second
again about
aspect.
the cyclical force.
I'm sorry?
Would you read that part again about the cyclical force?
Yeah, psychical.
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 Oh,
yeah, psychic. No, not cyclical, but psychic.
Gotcha.
Transmitters from various sources, 7 rays, planetary logos, logoic heart, and then this point from the 7 rishis of the Great Bear. This pours in via the monad and is transmitted downward, merging on the higher levels of the mental plane with 7 streams of energy from the Pleiades, which come in as the psychical force demonstrating through the solar angel. So again, we've got a 2 and a 3 and a 3 and a 2 in both the cases, Sirius and Pleiades.
Yeah, there's so many instances of the mythology of introducing the fire of mind, combining those 2 principles, because we tend to think of middle activity as the 3rd principle, but it's really the solar angel on a higher level that allows us to contact deity through mind.
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
Thanks, Michael, for that.
Thanks, Francis.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and then we have a couple of comments. Leslie says, if memory serves, The Creative Sound and the Aura are 2 books, and there are chapters in other books by Torquem Saradarian that describe in detail the importance of tonality, pitch, and accuracy of sound to achieve the outcome intended. It isn't, let me see. The effectiveness of the mantrams as you described.
There you go. Yeah, thank you for that. So it, certainly extends in every spiritual discipline. You're going to, at some point, come to this teaching, right? It involves the secret of initiation, right? What is it? At a certain initiation, you're given a letter or a syllable, and then later you're given a greater part of the hidden word, right? And I'm sure that these are oriented according to your soul ray. So there's great potency in this area of study. Anyone else before we go on?
Yes, Gary says, certainly have fun capturing faces trying to break this down.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at section B. That section A was very brief, which references the last 2 words of the verse, is one. Okay, so could we get a reader for this commentary?
Anna, can you read that for us, please? I can hear knocking, but I can't hear you talking. Okay, let's try Annette. Annette, can you read that for us, please? No, I don't hear Annette. Antoinette, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Good. This refers to the non-separateness of all that lives and has its being, whether in active or passive state. In one sense, O-E-R-O-Hu is the rootless root of all. Hence, one with from Parabrahman. In other sense, it is the name for the manifested one life, the eternal living unity. The root means, as already explained, pure knowledge or sattva, eternal, nitya, unconditioned reality or satya, whether we call it Parabrahman or Mula Prakriti, for these are the two aspects of the one. The light is the same omnipresent spiritual ray, which has entered and now fecundated the divine egg and calls cosmic matter to begin its long series of differentiations.
Thank you. So any thoughts or questions about this commentary? It's the rootless root because it has no predecessor. It seemingly comes, it is seemingly self-arising. That's why it's called the rootless root. HPB emphasizes its dual nature, pure knowledge, and eternal unconditioned reality. She goes on to say that the light is the fecundating agent, the quote, solitary ray dropped into the mother deep. Perhaps correctly intoning Oya-Ohu as one syllable invokes this rootless root, which is one with Parabrahm, whereas a threefold or sevenfold pronunciation would invoke specific aspects of the manifested life, or the manifested one life. Possibly knowing and correctly intoning Oya-Ohu in some one of its forms invokes the sound described by DK in Rule 3 of rays and initiations. I'm just going to read the last part. When the demand and the response are lost in one great sound, move outward from the desert, leave the seas behind, and know that God is fire. So you can see the possible connection here between this seven-syllabled word and the one great sound, which certainly is emanating from the logos. Okay, any thoughts about this? Okay, let's take a look at the footnote, which references the term sattva. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Diana,
Yes.
Can you read that? Thank you.
Yes, the original term for understanding is sattva, which Sankara Acharya renders antakarana, refined. He says, by sacrifices and other sanctifying operations, in the Katha sattva is said but by Sankara to mean buddhi, a common use of the word. Whatever meaning various schools may give the term, sattva is the name given among occult students of the Aryasanga school to the dual monad or Atma Buddhi. And Atma Buddhi on this plane corresponds to Parabrahm and Mula Prakriti on the higher plane.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this footnote? In the first two sentences, we learned that Shankaracharya equated sattva, which is pure wisdom, with both the antakarana and buddhi. We don't normally think of that connection, but it makes perfect transcendent sense. But the meaning that HPV clearly ascribes to sattva is Atma Buddhi. which she says corresponds, quote, to Parha Brahm and Mula Prakriti on the higher plane. So if you'll bear with me, let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary definition of Atma Buddhi. It's used all throughout the Secret Doctrine. And even though the terms overlap with Alice Bailey's use of those planes, the third, fourth, and third subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, it also has very specific meaning. So if we could get a reader for this section, please.
Risa, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, thank you, I will. Atma Buddhi, Sanskrit, from Atman, self, and Buddhi, spiritual soul, the divine spiritual part of a human being, the Pythagorean monas, or higher duad, full Mahatmas, who may be called Vajra Sattvas, have merged their whole being in their compound sixth and seventh principles, Atma Buddhi, through and with the Buddhi Manas. Atma Buddhi is impersonal and a god per se, but when divorced from Manas, it can have no consciousness or perception of things beneath its own plane.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. The three are quotes from 3 DK sources. So go ahead.
Atma Buddhi, from light out of the soul. Atma Buddhi, twofold expression of spirit, spiritual will and spiritual love, which completes a human being. Light of the soul, 179 to 180. The 2 eyes are the physical plane correspondences to the monad, who is will and love wisdom, or Atma Buddhi, according to the occult terminology. Rays and Initiations, page 44. It is interesting to note that the 2 major centers in the head corresponding to Atma Buddhi, or the soul, are the head center and the Alta major center, and that these correspond esoterically to the distributing agents of the right and left eyes. Esoteric Healing, page 581.
Fascinating material. I think it's interesting that Atma Buddhi, it's the top quote, Atma Buddhi is impersonal and a god per se, but when divorced from Manas, it can have no consciousness or perception of things beneath its own plane, which would be the spiritual triad. So I find that interesting. Okay, back to the commentary. Could we get a reader for this section?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Oh, we're starting down with the Kurds are the first differentiation? Okay.
Yeah.
The Kurds are the first differentiation, and probably refer also to that cosmic matter, which is supposed to be the origin of the Milky Way, the matter we know. This matter, which according to the revelation received from the primeval Dhyani Buddhas, is, during the periodical sleep of the universe, of the ultimate tenuity conceivable to the eye of the perfect Bodhisattva. This matter, radical and cool, becomes, at the first reawakening of cosmic motion, scattered through space, appearing when seen from the earth in clusters and lumps, like curds in thin milk. These are the seeds of the future worlds, the star stuff.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah. So radical, as here used, means both fundamental and far-reaching. Those are 2 other meanings of that term. Cool means, according to DK, existing in a state more tenuous than physical substance. Like in this case, a state far removed from physical substance. In this commentary, we're told that at least some of the ancient wisdom teachings come to us as a result of revelation received from the primeval Dhyani Buddhas, which is, even though it's only a kind of a side note, in this paragraph, it suggests that there were those who could record this knowledge. So let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary's definition of the Milky Way. Scott, could you just continue reading since you're already?
Sure. Milky Way. Theosophy regards the Milky Way as not only the origin of all manifested solar systems, but likewise as the repository of these solar systems when they finish their evolutionary course and return to the invisible background of the galaxy for their long pralaic rest. Yet this is but a minor part of that the Milky Way plays in the cosmic economy. For that pathway of the gods, as many ancient mystics called it, contains some of the deepest mysteries that the human mind in its endless research for truth and knowledge has unfolded.
Thanks, Scott. So I contemplated this and I came up with the idea that there's really two Milky Ways. One is a archetypal concept, and the other is, the name of the galaxy that we're in, right? And I'm wondering if the Milky Way, which unlike in the 19th century, we now know to be only one of trillions of galaxies, but which seems to be made up of wisps of light when seen with the naked eye, is not a symbol for the sea of milk, hence the name, rather than the actual nursery of all stars. Certainly we know that that could not be true, that our particular galaxy, and of course, this was believed by 19th century theosophists because astronomy hadn't progressed to the level it is today. But the concept of matter, quote, radical and cool, being in a state of ultimate tenuity as the Milky Way appears to be, still holds, right? This is Prakriti, which through the ray of light, quote unquote, that issues from darkness becomes star stuff, the seeds of future worlds. So any final thoughts or questions on this paragraph? Okay, then having considered HPB's commentary, let's take a final look at this short but pithy verse. The root remains, the light remains, the curds remain, and still Oiaohu is one. It's ironic to me that Oiaohu, which suggests that we pronounce it with 5 syllables, well, 5 syllables is the one pronunciation that HPB doesn't mention. She mentions 1, 3, and 7, right? So clearly we're not on to the way to pronounce this, right? Anyway, in our discussion of the Virgin Mother, we talked about the fact that the virgin egg remained unchanged after the male principle sprung forth to initiate manifestation. Remember that? The idea of remaining, that's part of the virgin aspect, right? Used 3 times in this verse, refers to the same unchanging quality. Though the root, the light, and the curds represent successive stages of becoming, they themselves remain unchanged by this process. The key to understanding this is the idea expressed in verse 1 of the stanza. The mother swells, expanding from within, without. The within remains. That's why it's the virgin egg, ever virgin. That is to say, forever remains unchanged. All change is seen in the successive outward expressions. Then we have the mystery of Oiaohu, which we're told stands for the 7 vowels, making it less a name than the outer form of the inherent life. For vowels are the life-carrying aspect of the words. the rootless root of all lesser logi. The verse states, and still Oeaohu is one, because we're told Oeaohu is simultaneously the 7, the 3, and the 1. The use of the word still in this verse I find interesting, almost suggesting that despite the fact that the root, the light, and the courage remain, still Oeaohu is one. The 3 and the 7, representing the initial stages of diversification, cannot affect the changelessness of the 1. One last observation, the root represents the father principle, the light, the second or son, and the courage, the third or mother aspect, with Oeaohu as father, mother, son, Pahabram and Mula Prakriti as the 3 in 1. So any thoughts or questions? Final chance for verse 5. Okay. Then on to verse 6. The root of life was in every drop of the ocean of immortality, Amrita. And the ocean was radiant light, which was fire and heat and motion. Darkness vanished and was no more. It disappeared in its own essence, the body of fire and water, of father and mother. The footnote tells us that Amrita, let's go over here. Where's the footnote? Where'd you go? Well, at any rate, the case of the missing footnote. Anyway, Amrita is the divine elixir, the 14th precious thing that was brought forth from the churning the sea of milk, right? Anyway, so let's take a look at the commentary. Could we get a reader for this first paragraph?
Martha, can you read that for us, please? Oops, I'm sorry, Marissa.
Marissa, the essence of darkness being absolute light. Darkness is taken as the appropriate allegorical representation of the condition of the universe during pralaya, or the term of the absolute rest, or non-being, as it appears to our finite minds. The fire, heat, and motion here spoken of are, of course, not the fire, heat, and motion of physical science, but the underlying abstractions, the noumenia, or the soul of the essence of these material manifestations, the things in themselves, which, as modern science confesses, entirely elude the instruments of the laboratory, and which even the mind cannot grasp, although it can equally little avoid the conclusions that these underlying essences of things must exist.
Thank you. So, thoughts or questions about this paragraph? HPB extends the concept of darkness, definitely relating it to pralaya, which we've determined is a solar pralaya. She stresses that darkness is an allegorical representation and reminds us that, as here described, heat, motion, and fire are noumenal, the soul and essence of what will become the outer manifestation. It's a long road from the conditions described in this stanza to the finite realm of the lower quaternary. This commentary also brings up a provocative line of inquiry. Darkness may be the condition of a solar pralaya, as, quote, it appears to our finite minds, unquote. But it is not to be confused with the absolute as described in the proem. Rather, as revealed in verses 3, 4, and 5, darkness is, in fact, the first logos, the elder oiaohu, which, though itself unmanifest, is the father mother of all manifestation in this solar system. Darkness radiates light, verse 3 tells us. This leads us to a provocative question. Is the condition present during a solar pralaya characterized by the absolute, or rather by something else, akin perhaps to an inactive first logos? Given the way in which manifestation is unfolding so far in stanza 3, I'm inclining towards the latter. So any thoughts or questions about this? You know, HPB delineates the description of pralaya, maha pralaya, which is absolute and total termination of all manifestation everywhere, right? In all existence. And very much distinguishes that from, you know, what you could call local pralayas, like a solar pralaya or even a planetary pralaya, right? You know, each of us has a pralaya when we go to sleep at night. So it's a time of inactivity and of a suspension of that phase called manifestation. But solar pralayas, etc., are described by HPB as everything freezes in place, in situ, and then starts up again on the new cycle. And if you really look into some old theosophical charts, you see these internal rounds and internal globes that pass above the line of the manifested globes, which suggests what? You know, phases of pralaya? Well, that seems like an oxymoron, you know, but we don't know because we couldn't possibly know. But it's something to think about. Next up, can we get a reader for this short part?
Martha, can you read that? You're self-muted. There you go.
The root of life is this the correct part? The root of life.
Actually, start with, that's the verse. We're on the commentary. Start with fire and water.
Fire and water, or father and mother, may be taken here to mean the divine ray and chaos. Chaos from this union with spirit obtaining sense, shone with pleasure, and thus was produced the protagonist, the firstborn light. Says a fragment of Hermas. Damascus calls it dis in theogony, the disposer of all things. See Corey's Ancient Fragments, page 314.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. Any thoughts or questions about this? Obviously, pleasure is an elevated form, and as in bliss, the pleasure of union with the divine. The Indian, East Indian sculptures are show this often. HPB associates this primordial fire with the father principle, the divine ray, and water with the mother aspect, or chaos. There's a footnote after the word father that reads, Si Quan Shai Yin. The real name from the text cannot be given. Okay, so some hidden name for the father aspect. So let's take a look at what the Theosophical Glossary has to say about the Quan Shai Yin, which is the father aspect. Can we get a reader for this? This, by the way, is a very rare painting from the 14th century, and the inner sanctum of a monastery. It's in some disrepair, but you can see all the arms suggesting this is like 1,000 arms, suggesting the ring pass knot of this Quan Shai Yin.
Okay, Michael, Stacy, can you read that for us, please? There, thanks.
Quan Shai Yin, equivalent to the Sanskrit Avalokiteswara, both being the seventh cosmic principle. Mystically, the cosmic logos or word, and in common with all the logoi referred to as a cosmic dragon of wisdom. The first universal Manus or cosmic Dian Chohans. Quan Shai Yin is often confused with Kuan Yin, the Chinese goddess of compassion, the feminine logos and counterpart of Quan Shai Yin. But Quan Shai Yin, or the universally manifested voice, is active, male, and must not be confounded with Kuan Yin, or Buddhi, the spiritual soul, the sixth principle, and the vehicle of its Lord. It is Kuan Yin that is the female principle, or the manifested passive, manifesting itself to every creature in the universe, in order to deliver all men from the consequences of sin. While Quan Shai Yin, the son identical with his father, is the absolute activity, hence, having no direct relation to objects of sense, is passivity.
Thanks, Michael. So, we see the Kuan Yin aspect as being very much like the second principle, the bridging aspect, that allows the imprisoned third principle to find redemption, and through Kuan Yin to final realization of their identity with the Quan Shai Yin. Avalokiteshvara is a much more common in Buddhism, much more commonly used for that, but this is the Chinese version of that concept. So let's see here. Let's go on to the next paragraph, unless anybody have any questions about this idea?
Francis,
yeah.
I had a thought, just briefly. I think there are, as you were suggesting, phases of pralaya, just the way there are when a human being leaves the etheric physical plane. And I think if we drew the analogy between the human departure and passage up to the higher mental plane, we could understand maybe what the solar logos's pralaya really is between its manifestations of different solar systems. So, something you said got me thinking about that. And I think that the final destination up there is the first subplane of the higher mental plane, whereon the causal logos is found. And that would account for a pralaya in terms of solar logoic terms. Sorry to be out of sequence, but you got me thinking of that. Yeah.
No, I invite you all to speak out of sequence whenever you feel like it, because sometimes we, just get rolling along here. And so always feel free to chime in whenever you'd like. That idea, which was initially confusing from the point of view of like a Mahapralaya, but the very first verse of the first stanza, which is, I can't directly quote it, but the deity aspect had slept wrapped in her invisible robes for 7 eternities, and once again for 7 eternities or something like that. And first question right out of the bag is, hey, if you're in pralaya, how can there be multiple eternities? But I think because the Secret Doctrine is these stanzas of Dzyan speak to a solar pralaya, that helps solve that mystery, and what you just said as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Francis?
Okay. Yeah.
Gary says, ocular construct, to see peace held aloft.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Gary, would you like to elaborate on that? I like the term.
Well,
I like the whole thing.
Well, the image itself looks very much like an ocular construct of the lower sort of third of the picture there itself. Okay, and well, that's it. And I think
right. Okay.
If you've been granted a ray of light, then you would, well, it's a responsibility to see that peace is held aloft. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Great. It's, it's so anybody who tries to paint spiritual reality comes up against the fact that they're dealing with substance. They're going to create a form, right? You can't not create a form. And so the whole thing becomes a metaphor and a metaphoric translation. But I mean, that would be enough in most cases just to put down your brushes and move on. But you can create a channel that brings some relation to the vibration of that which you're attempting to paint down into making it accessible, to the lower quaternary. And that's, but it must always be remembered, this was not a snapshot of Avalokitesvara. But yeah, I really like that description. Say it again, an ocular
construct, to see peace held aloft.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's quite poetic, actually. Thank you for that, Gary.
Thank you.
Okay. So on to the next paragraph. Could we get a reader for this?
Gary, can you read that for us, please?
From the top. The root of life.
Actually, let me explain something to everyone. The reason I keep that in dark font is because all of these commentaries relate to the verse, and I want you to be able to refer to it whenever you'd like, without squinting. But in fact, when you're reading, always go to the excuse me, to the dark,
highlighted text below.
Yep. Yeah, to the text below. That's just for reference point. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. According to the Rosicrucian tenets, as handled and explained by the profane for once correctly, if only partially, so light and darkness are identical in themselves, being only divisible in the human mind. And according to Robert Flood, darkness adopted illumination in order to make itself visible. And on Rosencrantz, according to the tenets of Eastern occultism, darkness is the one true actuality, the basis and the root of light, without which the latter could never manifest itself, nor even exist. Light is matter and darkness pure spirit. Darkness in its radical metaphysical basis is subjective and absolute light, while the latter in all its seeming effulgence and glory is merely a mass of shadows, as it can never be eternal and is simply an illusion or maya.
this is quite a provocative paragraph. So any thoughts or questions about this really revelatory understanding of dark and light, darkness and light? You may have noticed that HPB often unfolds the concepts posed by these verses in layers, right? Here she further develops the concept of light and darkness. Robert Flood, his quote, "Darkness adopted illumination in order to make itself visible." I love that. That's I think this is an illustration from a book that he did on the left. So it underscores, this quote underscores the idea that darkness, which is absolute light, personified in Hindu mythology as Narayana, right? Remember him breathing over the chaos or the dark waters of space. That this personification has intent and manifests that intention through light, right? Darkness adopted illumination in order to make itself visible. Okay, on to the final paragraph of the commentary on verse 6. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Yvonne, would you like to read that for us? And yeah, I saw your hand go up and then go down, so yeah.
Okay, my question was on the last one, and then I will read this about the darkness. The one before that. Darkness is the one true actuality, the basis and the root of light. I was thinking of the dark holes in the universe and how, from what I understand, this is where all creation comes when they think there's nothing there, but this is where all the new solar systems or stars, all the new creation comes. Is that true? Does this refer to this?
Well, I don't think this, I think this is less on the physical plane that is being described here. However, there's a direct analogy there. You know, light, you know, Einstein discovered is substance. It's a physical substance, and dark holes trap light literally through its gravitational pull, and therefore it can't, quote, escape or shine forth. Now, you know, the idea that that then becomes a nursery is, I think, comes from the idea that there's been discoveries that there are dark holes at the centers of galaxies, and therefore may indeed, you know, have something to do with the creation. But we, you know, there's no actual evidence of, for instance, a star coming forth from a dark hole. At least that's how I understand it. Now, when you get me into pure science, you know, I'm on shakier ground. If anybody can, you know, can support or refute what I just said, please feel free to, right?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Now, you know, what he's describing here is unmanifest causal levels of, quote, existence, which of course becomes an oxymoron because the term existence, you could say, better word would be being, you know, unmanifest beingness, right? But still in this period of manifestation, right, in this Manvantara. So for instance, Ya'ohu, who is the darkness that breathes over the waters of space, is this being and is at a level of absolute light that stands beyond the light that we know that emanates from darkness. Okay, let's see. Okay. So could we get a reader for this?
Okay. Even in the mind-baffling and science-harassing Genesis, Light is created out of darkness, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and not vice versa. In him, in darkness, was life, and the life was the light of men. A day may come when the eyes of men will be opened, and then they may comprehend better than they do now. That verse in the Gospel of John that says, "And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not." They will see then that the word darkness does not apply to man's spiritual eyesight, but indeed to darkness, the absolute, that comprehendeth not, cannot cognize transient light, however transcendent the human eyes.
Thank you. So, thoughts or questions?
Francis, I have one little thought, but it's a little bit in a different system. I go along with this, that the absolute is absolute darkness, and I just want to say that I think it's because of the impossibility within the absolute of any self-perception. In other words, there's no division within the absolute whatsoever. So self-perception or perception in general is what brings light. That creates matter. And when you can't have that because there's no division, then it has to remain utterly dark, but at the same time, utterly real. But something that comes out of it, you know, some of these logoi and all of that, they do have the divisions which make possible self-reflection and thus light and thus perception and thus matter. You know, so it's all a perceptual construct, at least in my mind at this time.
No, absolutely. And thanks for bringing that up. This term that darkness comprehendeth it not. You know, the lower, the usual exoteric biblical meaning is that, you know, evil cannot comprehend light. But the higher meaning is that how can you comprehend something that is part of your own unity? I mean, even saying part of is erroneous, because if all that is oneness, which is beingness, then there is no comprehension. It's beyond the other, which is what's necessary for the whole system of which comprehending is a part of, simply has been transcended.
Exactly. This utter beingness or utter beingness or utter absoluteness has no need of what divisions can produce. It somehow is all those things without having to exemplify them as parts and pieces. So, but it's a mystery, you know, and but you're led there when you start to think about it.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, thanks, Michael.
Yep.
So, let's see here. HPB's first quote in Genesis, "And darkness was upon the face of the deep," is more fully addressed, at least in my opinion, by verse 2 of this stanza. The vibration sweeps along, touching with its swift wing the whole universe, and the germ that dwelleth in darkness, the darkness that breathes over the slumbering waters of life, right? And that last part of it is the second verse of Genesis, "And darkness was upon the face of the deep." But we get, it's just articulated so much more fully in the stanzas of Dzyan, the darkness that breathes over the slumbering waters of life. A terrific compilation of all HPB's New Testament references was published in 1987. Noteworthy, given the fact that in the 80s there was no word search or ebooks to help Sperenberg navigate the over 10,000 pages of HPB material. In this compilation, there is a reference to this same verse, John 1:4. from the last pages of the Secret Doctrine, first volume, which sheds further light on the nature of fire, water, and darkness. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. Leslie, can you read that for us, please?
On John I-4, occult science teaches that Mother lies stretched in infinity during pralaya as the great deep, the dry waters of space, according to the quaint expression in the Catechism, and becomes wet only after the separation and the moving over its face of Narayana, the spirit which is inevitable flame, invisible flame, which never burns, but sets on fire all that it touches and gives it life and generation.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this? This is a rare, and if I may say so, thrilling description of the fire of pure spirit. Okay, back to the commentary.
You have a question. I just have to find it. Go ahead, please, Scott.
Yeah, going back to that, the end of that, this flame sets on fire all that it touches and gives it life. What is it that it is before it gives it life then? Is not it life already?
Well, I think it's transferring that spirit, which is invisible flame, which never burns, but sets on fire all that it touches and gives it life and generation. I think the it is referring to all that it touches.
Well, my question is about the word life. What is it before it's given light?
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's a good point. I get you. Right. Yeah, you know what I would say, the use of life here is the quickening that moves the quiescent. Let's go back to what would be called the dry waters of space, or the primordial deep. That level of reality, that it quickens it with life and generation. Slightly different use of the word life as in pure spirit first principle. And yet still that word is applicable because the life never is no unit of substance is without life. But I think this has to do with the quickening of all units of consciousness into, quote, life and generation.
I think that is how you have to parse it, and the limits of English and having the one word life here, and yet we're talking about it, as you're saying, in many different, and all of this, in so many different levels and understandings of it and applications of it.
Yeah, you could almost call it like, pre-consciousness. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Oh, all right. I was just saying that it conflates all of these different understandings of life into one four-letter word in English, and it's much more complicated than one word. Given one word to know how we're dealing with it. So I think I like what you have to say about it.
Yeah. You might, to look a little deeper into it, that which eventually becomes consciousness is what, you could say it almost separates it from the realm of the mother and mula prakriti, which is a kind of unified substance, and gives it a particularity, and from that generation. It's one interpretation. Thanks for that. I love this dry waters of space. It talks about an oxymoron. What are you going to do with that? Well, the whole concept of wetness being a function of existence, you know, I find fascinating, you know, that the dry is related to, you know, the quality of fire, you know, because after all, water and fire are the fundamental opposites. You know, he talks about you know, fire and water being the first and second principle that, or when there's only two principles, that is, of father and mother. And so before that, the waters are dry, you know, so the mother aspect wasn't active, right? At least that's how I'm reading that. Okay, but to me, it's quite an inspirational quote. Never burns, but sets on fire all that it touches. That's a beautiful thing. Okay, back to the commentary. Here, H.P.B. Ford's an explanation concerning the darkness and darkness that comprehendeth not. That is at some variance with the commonly held idea that this darkness applies to humanity's lack of spiritual eyesight. His interpretation, of course, totally transforms the import of John 1:5. Okay. Yeah. It's I'm referencing, you know, the discussion that Michael and I had on this. It's the higher octave of understanding. So could we get a reader for this quote from Key to Theosophy that actually gives us yet another idea around darkness not comprehending light?
Hello,
And
can you hear
Veronica,
me?
yeah, can you read that for us, please?
And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Verily may we paraphrase verse 5 in the first chapter of St. John and say, an absolute light, which is darkness, shineth in darkness, which is illusionary material light, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. This absolute light is also absolute and immutable law. Whether by radiation or emanation, we need not quarrel over the terms. The universe passes out of its homogeneous subjectivity onto the first plane of manifestation, of which planes there are 7, we are taught.
Thank you. So here, HPB reverses our usual understanding of light and darkness, suggesting that darkness is actually illusionary material light. And what that illusory darkness doesn't comprehend is true darkness, which is absolute light. Are you following me here? What, okay, I'm going to say it again because it's tricky. She suggests that darkness, quote unquote, is actually illusionary material light. And what that illusory darkness doesn't comprehend is true darkness, which is actually absolute light. Yeah, if you love philosophy, you love sentences like this. Turns everything on its head, but makes perfect sense esoterically. Okay. This is seemingly at odds with comments she gives in the commentary on verse 6. But actually, I think both ideas are true for the faculty of cognizance, which is, this concept was brought up by Michael. Faculty of cognizance requires a subject-object paradigm in order to operate. And the darkness described in the Secret Doctrine stands beyond all duality, all otherness, and thus doesn't participate in the realm of cognition, for it is one with all that it would cognize. So we have these two ideas, right? This great kind of turning in on itself of darkness actually being illusory light, which can't comprehend true darkness. And then this idea, which is that darkness is non-dual and therefore is beyond cognition. So if you haven't run screaming in the other direction, we could go on here. Any thoughts or questions about this?
I have a little thing, Francis. You know, way closer to home, we have the whole question of our personality life looking at Shambhala, which is like for us, absolute light. It's not really, but it's quite absolute on the cosmic physical plane. And it's totally dark to the attempted penetration of the personality faculties and mind and so forth. And it's only when we rise high enough along the Antakarana that we can deal with the true descriptions of Shambhala, which are filled with the most beautiful kind of design and light, and filled with beings that are called the lights that carry out the will of God.
Oh, yes.
So, you know, right down here on our own level of attempt, we have kind of an analogy.
Well, I think it truly is an analogy because those higher realities are beyond any kind of direct perception. But you know, the soul is light. But at some point, is it Rule 9 that talks about this? You know, where go beyond color, and then all there is light. Now go beyond light to into the dark. And at the very center of that darkness, I'm
right,
paraphrasing.
That's
yeah,
it.
the very center of that darkness, you know, see the one eye that appeared, I can't remember, that appeared when you first passed through the door, something like that.
Yeah, the flame, the flame of the logo, planetary logos. Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Right. So it, you know, this really gives us the nomenclature, you know, of, you know, color, which is really something that is reflective, that happens in the quaternary, right, in its reflective sense. And then to light, which is made up of all color, which is the nature of the solar aspect and of our own solar angels. And then, but then you to go to the first aspect, to Shambhala, as you were describing, then you have to go, as you described, into the darkness.
To see the real light. It's like we're blinded by the obvious. You know, everybody in the hall of ignorance, everybody's taking the obvious for real, but it's a false light compared to the real thing, and it has to be broken down eventually by the penetration of the real thing into the false light. Well, it takes a long time.
You know, I'm so glad you brought up what you just said, because it really extends this metaphor, you know, to illusion. You know, that illusion is the lower darkness, you could say, you know, the darkness of non-perception, and that there is the light of the soul that reveals the truth. But then at some point you move from a revelation of the truth to beingness in the monad. So you pitch back out of light into absolute light, which is called darkness. You know, it's like levels of.
Just keeps going, I think, in that way, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and we know, you know, it doesn't stop with the monad, certainly, or Shambhala. But after that, you know, when you make that great leap into these cosmic truths, it becomes somewhat academic, maybe much more useful to stay with, you know, what we can relate to. You know.
Yeah, well, both are important, of course. Yeah,
I think both do, because the higher gives us the structure to understand the lower.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see, where are we? Okay, so let's see. Could we get a reader for this next section, please? This will be the commentary on verse 6.
Yes. Martha, can you read that for us? I'm trying to unmute you, but now you're self-muted.
There
you
are
go.
Are there two Marthas on the panel? Is
Yeah,
there the other Martha?
There are two Marthas, but I wanted you.
Thank you. Demon est Deus in verses. The devil is now called darkness by the church, whereas in the Bible, he is called the Son of God. See Job. The bright star of the early morning, Lucifer. See Isaiah. There is a whole philosophy of dogmatic craft in the reason why the first archangel, who sprang from the depths of chaos, was called Lux, Lucifer, the luminous sun of the morning, or Manvantaric dawn. He was transformed by the church into Lucifer or Satan because he is higher and older than Jehovah and had to be sacrificed to the new dogma. See Book 2, Secret Doctrine, page 70 and 71.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, this is the kind of statement whose repetition would have got us burned at the stake just a few hundred years ago, right? Glorifying Lucifer. There's a couple of key thoughts here. Let's see, actually, you know what? We're running over. I think this is a big theme. And so let's pick up right here with this concept of Lucifer on our next webinar. And so I thank you all it's become a loyal crew now, loyal to the Secret Doctrine, that is, to have stuck with us for 23 episodes. And I'm very much enjoying hosting this. So the next one should be the third Sunday of October. Is that
right? It's the 20th. It's the 20th of October. Yes.
20th of October. Great. However, we have another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from today, in fact, which will be the third webinar on the secret teaching of all ages.
That's the 6th of October.
6th of October, great. So either at that webinar or at the next Secret Doctrine webinar, we'll see you then. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Francis and Bill. Thank you.